sequence start. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello to you all out there. Happy Sunday evening. Let me take a quick look here, pop out this chat so I can follow along. Hello there, yeah, Katie Cat, Galen, Tariq, hey everybody. Mike says greetings from California. JG, Jana, ZZJ17, everybody out there in the chat, hello. Good to see you. Looking forward to spending some time with you guys tonight chatting about recent events and I guess more specifically just how things are going and what kind of a crazy, crazy world we have got right now. So give me a 5x5 or thumbs up or something out there. Let me know how my sound level is. I'm once again using OBS. This is my second time using it, so I don't know how well I've got things configured here. Scott Harris says, was watching a movie when my Blackstone alarm went off, giving me 3 minutes to rise out of my bong for another show. All right. All right. Looks like sounds good. Everything's in good working order. So, I guess let's talk about some of this. There's political foolishness. So, when I talk about some of these things here that are current hot topics, those are the ones where we usually have the most trolls show up. So, you mods out there, if you see comments that are just nasty or people trying to fight or anything, I will trust you to take care of business. So, hey, Joel Dalton, good to see you. I'm just waiting for a few people to come on in. So things are kind of rough out there, aren't they? The seams of American society are stretching toward that point where it starts to rip. I've never seen so much anger in the United States, like vicious anger in a way that's goes right. It's spreading like wildfire. Hopefully in the coming days things will start to settle down, but so much is going on in America that has got not just the right but the people on the left angry. And we've got both sides right now that are just furious. You've got the Democrats are sickened by all of these ICE raids, and some Republicans too. The general public is furious over U.S. support for Israel's genocide of the Palestinians. I'm talking about the larger, not the Christian Zionists who cheer it on, but the general public, even a good segment of the Republican Party, is starting to wake up, and they're upset. You've got MAGA, which is reeling from confusion over Trump's bizarre tariffs that are wreaking havoc on the U.S. economy. His strikes on Iran upset them, although they kept their mouths shut about that. MAGA is having to watch his brazen efforts to protect Jeff Epstein's child sex trafficking network and the elite pedophiles that were ensnared in it. So they've been kind of quiet on a lot of this. The Republicans have been kind of in the background, gritting their teeth and bearing it, because they haven't had a whole lot there going well for them. But now we've got the killing of Charlie Kirk, and all of that air they've been holding in is being released, flooding social media with anger directed at Democrats who they blame for Charlie Kirk's murder, despite the fact that the kid came from a Republican household and it clearly has been radicalized and moved away from how he was raised in his home. But social media is on fire with some of the most hate-filled rhetoric from both sides that I have seen ever. It's worse than the height of the BLM riots or the Antifa crime spree, the kind of vitriol that's in social media. So America is ripe for a major outbreak of civil unrest. Now, you guys know that my own educational background is in history. My concentration in college was the American Revolution and World War II. And I've got a large library of books on both of those subjects. So I'll show you a couple books here that I really enjoy. Fighting Auschwitz is a really good book. Story of the prisoner underground at the concentration camp. Very, very good book. Hitler, the Germans, and the Final Solution by Ian Kershaw. Kershaw is a very good author, has written a lot of good stuff. Another one, Hitler and the Final Solution, talking about this. The guy who has, Jewish scholar, who is credited by most people, Jews and non-Jews alike, as probably having the most accurate study of the Holocaust, was Raoul Hilberg. This book, The Destruction of the European Jews, goes through and I mean, it's not, this is some small print. This is not easy reading. But his estimates are actually lower than the estimates given by the museums. Actually, one of the two major Holocaust museums has a different, they differ from each other. The U.S. Holocaust Museum and the Israeli Holocaust Museum give different totals for the Holocaust. But in general, we're looking at around 11 to 12 million people who were killed during this period of time. That would be taking everyone into account. I don't, when I think of the Holocaust, while I understand there was a disproportionate number of Jews killed, I don't like to frame it only as it was a Jewish only Holocaust. There were millions and millions of people killed, and them being Jewish, I don't think really should determine whether or not we remember or talk about them. And Raoul Hilberg certainly doesn't only talk about that. But one book that is really good is William Scherer's The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. And this one has got a lot of information, and some of the information I'll be sharing tonight, comes from his research. I've got, I don't have it anymore. I used to have a first edition of a Mein Kampf, and I'm not going to really show off the title here because I don't want people screenshotting this and a Canary Mission adding this to my dossier they have on me. But I've read Mein Kampf. I've got books behind me that are from Jewish sources, from non-Jewish sources. Someone out there asking about books by David Irving. I do have first edition copies of Hitler's War, volumes 1 and 2. I've got those over there. I've got this David Irving book here, Apocalypse 1945, The Destruction of Dresden, which is really good. So when I study a topic, I've got David Irving's stuff, but I've also got Deborah Lipstadt, who is the Zionist that was in the lawsuit with him, where he was being sued for anti-Semitism and whatnot. So I listen to both sides of an argument. I try and hear out both sides and then make up my own damn mind as to what I think. If you confine yourself only to David Irving, you're not going to get a full picture. If you confine yourself only to Lipstadt or that perspective, then you're not going to hear things the right way. You have to take it all in and make up your own mind based on the aggregate of information. Because no author is totally unbiased. Everybody has an agenda, and you can try. You can, as a writer, as a researcher, as a scholar, academic, you're trained to try to avoid bias, and there's ways that you can do that. But in the end, no matter how much effort you put in, you are going to be presenting a certain amount of bias. And that's why it's important for us to listen to the various angles and sides of an argument. That's something I'm concerned about right now. The left is not listening to the right, and the right is not listening to the left when it comes to the issues that are really tearing our society apart right now. Doesn't mean you have to agree with the other side, but you need to listen and consider and see where do we have common ground. Let's start with, what do we agree on? Let's start from there, and we can go from there. And if you don't try and understand the perspective of the other person, then your conversation's not going to go anywhere. And I'll tell you guys, I started taking speech and debate in middle school, and then in high school continued it. And I was lucky in high school that my speech and debate class was 3 people. Me as a freshman starting out, and 2 seniors. And one of those 2 seniors, one was a Republican, one was a hardcore liberal Democrat. And the liberal, his name was Jason. Jason ate a lot. He was actually the high school debate champion for the entire East Coast. He went through all the levels and so he was good. And so I was lucky to be in a class with someone who was a skilled debater. I was not lucky when my final exam for the year was a debate between me and him on a subject that was not a good subject for me. It was on euthanasia, and I had to argue. I was assigned to argue about why euthanasia is a good thing. And let me just say, it did not go well. I tried an approach that was not very popular. I was talking about the economic benefits of not only permitting euthanasia, but encouraging it among the elderly population. And so I'm sitting there, and the judges, when I walked into the room and saw the judges, and they're all these wrinkled old people, like, oh man, I'm dead. But anyway, sometimes being provocative does not turn out the way you want. But anyway, I've also collected a lot of stuff over the years. This is my autograph album. I've got mostly, I've got like these. That's not an autograph, but classic monsters, movie monster stamps. I've got stuff like Star Wars autographs. Carrie Fisher down here. I've got her autograph up here. I've got Peter Mayhew, Carrie Fisher, C-3PO, Han Solo. They all sign that. There's Captain Kirk's autograph. But anyway, so I've collected a ton of these autographs over the years just because I'm a fanboy with some of that. Started out as a kid. I've got, was my local horror movie host when I was a little kid, Big Wilson. But in addition to all of that, I have got some photos, some historical photos of, there's the, I keep that in there. That's that from when Blackstone Intelligence, when we rallied together and got the 1,200 olive trees to replace for the trees that had been cut down by Israeli settlers. But anyway, something else I've got here, I won't show it real close, but I've got, these are World War II, or actually before World War II, some stamps, unused stamps that's got Hitler on it. Now, this over here, picture of Hitler, certificate of authenticity behind it. This was a picture, just an original photo that a reporter had taken. This is before World War II. But the one photo that I really like that I used to have it framed, and I took it out because I I wanted to, I didn't want the light to dull it over time. But I've got this picture down here of, these are some kids in Auschwitz on the day they were liberated by Russian soldiers. I've collected artifacts, and I've got bullets. I've got a World War II helmet from a French soldier that was killed. I really enjoy studying history. I love collecting these artifacts. I like being able to put my hands on pieces of history. And so what I'm going to talk about today is my view of the state of America today in how it relates to mostly 1930s Germany. And because what I see happening in America today is so similar to the polarization that I studied during the Weimar Republic in Germany. The Weimar Republic was that period of time after World War I, basically 1919 until around 1933. The period of time in between the two world wars. That was known as the Weimar Republic. I'm going to talk tonight about America today and that time period in Germany and how there was a change in society. And if you guys have any trouble hearing me out there, let me know. So we're going to do this show in two parts tonight. First, I'm going to talk about World War I and how it demoralized Germany and set the psychological foundation for the rise of fascism. Then we're going to pause for a minute. And when we start up again in part two, I'm going to talk about fascism, how it spread in Germany, specifically the psychology of extremism. And I'm going to compare and contrast that with what is happening in America today. Before I get started, let me put this number up again. For future shows, this one's a little more serious, but for future shows, if anyone would like to leave a voicemail for Blackstone that we will use in future shows, I do play some viewer messages, listener messages. You can call Blackstone and leave a message. This is not my personal phone number, so don't think you're going to call it and get me. But this is one of my voicemail numbers. 303-900-FART. That's 303-900-3278. Call now. Operators are not standing by. You're welcome to call at any point. Leave a message. Just remember, anything you say on there can and will be used against you on the Blackstone Intelligence program. Now, I do want to, so I don't have to do this much during the show, I do want to ask you to support the show with your donations. Here's how you can donate as we go along. Of course, you're welcome to do super chat donations. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a drawing tonight. For anyone who donates $5 or more, you will be entered into a drawing. We'll put your name down on a slip of paper. For every $5 increment, you'll get an entry into the drawing. So if you do $5, you get one entry. If you do $15, you'll get 3 entries. Put your name in the jar, shake it up, and select someone. Now, depending on the donation level, if we as a group hit, if we're under $100 total in donations tonight, then we're going to give out a Tier 1 Blackstone reward. So that would include your choice of either a free month of Substack of the Blackstone Intelligence newsletter, free month of YouTube channel membership at the $5 and up level, or a free month of Patreon at the $5 and up level. And all of those give you access to Blackstone intelligence reports as I put them out. I haven't put out anything this last week, so there's not much there. I do have Stephen, who I have been waiting. Stephen, if he shows up at some point, Stephen Niflis, I'm going to be giving him from the last show a new month of Patreon. But anyway, so you've got those options. Another prize option is our famous Jeff Epstein, "This air freshener didn't hang itself." So that's an option. Another option is an autographed transcript of tonight's show, which will probably come out to be around 10 to 15 typed pages of material, historical material that I'll be sharing with you tonight. So I'd be glad to write you a personal letter, autograph the transcript, and send that to you. So those are some of the options you can get if you make a donation of $5 or more. If we hit that $100 level and up, if we have a collective total of $100 or more, then we bump it up to where the additional options for prizes are going to be any of those, but also I've got a few copies of this David Irving book on Apocalypse 1945, The Destruction of Dresden, the horrifying original account of the most devastating attack in history, the book which first told the world what happened to one German city in 1945. This is where the Allies, at the tail end of the war, when Germany was basically beat, they went in and firebombed Dresden and created literal tornadoes of fire that swept through the city, killing tens of thousands of people in a matter of hours, burned them alive in a literal Holocaust. So anyway, I'd be glad to autograph this book and send it out as a prize. So that is one option. Another option is going to be a Free Palestine kit, and that would include one of these desk flags. Okay. A Palestine desk flag. A Free Palestine bracelet. As a flag, says Free Palestine in English and in Arabic. Palestine flag lapel pin. And then a couple of random Free Palestine stickers. So that's one gift option. And then the last one would be a 15-minute phone call with me. If you wanted to chat, we can call and have a private hangout. So those are the reward options. So if you're interested in any of those things, get your donations in as the show goes on. Anyone who makes a donation of $50 or more, I'm going to give you just automatically, I can put you in the drawing, but automatically, donation of $50 or more, you're going to get a 1-month subscription to any of the services that I have, an autographed copy of tonight's report. You'll get a free Palestine support kit and the 15-minute phone call with me. All of that for a donation of $50 or more. All right, so you can see on the screen here the ways that you can donate. We've got super chats. Hey, there's Stephen. Says he's moving to the volunteer state tomorrow. Stephen, I don't know if you were in here earlier. I've still got this here. I haven't put out new Blackstone reports this week, so I haven't reactivated your new month of Patreon because I didn't want the timer to start until I've got some new content out. So anyway, I haven't forgotten. I've got it right here. Thank you for the donation, Stephen. I appreciate you. That gives you 2 entries into tonight's drawing. So you guys, you can do super chat donations. You can sub to Patreon, YouTube, channel membership, which should be just a button that says join somewhere there on your phone or your desktop. Substack. Here, I'll put these links in here. So there's Substack. Here are the links to Patreon. Actually, I only see one link there. I was going to say Patreon. There is Buy Me a Coffee. And there is PayPal. These are just my different donation links. This should be in the show notes as well. So any of these are ways that you can donate, okay? So enough of all that. Let's get started. World War I. Oh, thank you, Mike, for that donation. Please sell us the Las Vegas series. I need it. We'll see. We'll see. I got to go through that stuff and see what I can get away with putting out that won't get me in trouble. R Factor, thank you for your donation. Appreciate you. World War I was an extremely significant historical event, but it was significant not just for the United States, but for the entire world. And yet Americans, if you stop the average American on the street and say, hey, what was World War I about? Probably 9 out of 10 people aren't going to be able to really articulate what the war is about. It's not just because our education system in America is subpar, which it is. It's also because the ruling class responsible for that war and other wars, they don't want us dim-witted plebs or the larger proletariat to learn that almost all of these wars come down to groups of rich people fighting other groups of rich people for control of resources that they need to either maintain or to expand their wealth. Before World War I, so I'm going to tell you about World War I first, in this first half. Before World War I, the area of Bosnia and Herzegovina had been under the control of the Ottoman Empire, which was kind of the Muslim caliphate, had been under control of the Ottomans for centuries. But in 1878, there was a new rising empire in that region called the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And they took control of the region and took over this territory of Bosnia. And in 1908, the Austro-Hungarian Empire formally annexed the territory. Bosnia and Herzegovina was full of Slavic nationalist groups, especially in neighboring Serbia. And so the annexation of this territory by Austria-Hungary really inflamed tensions and pissed off a lot of these nationalist groups. This isn't something of an ethnic rivalry. Sarajevo was the capital of Bosnia. In 1914, you got this guy, the Archduke of Austria-Hungary. His name was Franz Ferdinand. He's visiting Sarajevo. And during that visit, a Bosnian Serb nationalist assassinated him. And this sets off a month-long series of political and diplomatic actions with Austria-Hungary basically saying, here, they gave these harsh ultimatums to Serbia, which Serbia rejected, and Germany had helped to craft some of this as advisors. So on July 28th, 1914, which was exactly 1 month after the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. Russia, which was allied with Serbia, they mobilized their forces in defense of their Slavic neighbor. Then you've got Germany, which was allied with Austria-Hungary. They declare war on Russia, and that happens rather quickly on August 1st. So next, Germany declares war on France 2 days after that. So we've got this domino effect. when German forces invaded neutral Belgium so that they could advance through Belgium into France, that violated Belgium's neutrality. So Britain, which was bound by treaty to defend Belgian neutrality, they declare war on Germany the following day. So you've got this rapid escalation that brings most of Europe into a devastating global conflict, with the alliances transforming what started out as a little localized dispute into a continent-wide war, which expanded even further. And this, by the way, is the exact scenario that we have to fear today from the conflict between NATO and Russia. It's not actually a war between Ukraine and Russia. Ukraine was actually had a pro-Russian president until the CIA went in and deposed him. Ukraine is just a NATO proxy being used by the West, especially by Western intelligence, most prominently the CIA. So one wrong move could trigger a hypersonic domino effect like we saw before World War I that pulls all of Europe and the USA into war with Russia and its allies, which would likely include Iran, North Korea, China. North Korea and China are both nuclear armed, so this is not good. This is why the United States and NATO, NATO is just the U.S. military in Europe by a different name. That's all it is. It's 70% of the troops in NATO are American troops. We need to stop arming Ukraine. We need to stop meddling in the internal conflicts in Europe, because our intermeddling, specifically that 2014 CIA coup in Kiev, that is what has led to the wider hostilities taking place today. Vladimir Putin went in after there was already 7 years of war going on Russia's doorstep, as it has watched NATO pushing, and U.S. politicians like Senator McCain, Lindsey Graham, others going over there, urging them on, telling Ukraine, keep fighting, in this war in the Donbass, the eastern region of Ukraine. We are screwing around. Our founding fathers said no entangling alliances. Stay out of the affairs of other countries. Anyway, if we zoom out, this World War I wasn't just about Balkan politics spiraling out of control. There's a deeper way of looking at it, which is to see that it was part of a much bigger struggle. An overextended British Empire at this point, already in decline, is desperately trying to hold on to its global dominance, at the same time that Germany is quickly rising as an economic power, a military power, and they're starting to challenge or threaten British hegemony as the dominant empire. So among many other activities, Germany was by this time strengthening their economic ties with the Ottoman Empire. They had plans for a Berlin to Baghdad railway, which was going to bypass British-controlled trade routes. A lot of the stuff going on in the Middle East today has to do with oil pipelines and natural gas pipelines and who controls this territory, who can flip this country and put puppets in so that we can get permission to route through this way. A big reason that they're trying to that Israel wants to cleanse Gaza, especially the middle part through the area of Gaza City, is because of a pipeline, railway lines. There's all kinds of things that Netanyahu wants to do for his buddies over there, including U.S. investors and people like Donald Trump's family, who stand to profit quite a bit from the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. So that's what was going on back then as well. Not much changes over time. The same motivations are there, whether it's wars 100 years ago, 200 years ago, or wars today. So British politicians are watching this. British investors, British bankers the financial elites, they're seeing that their stranglehold, their control, their domination is being threatened by the rise of Germany. And so this really frightens the British aristocracy there. A collapse in British dominance would be destructive to the financial interests of the corporate and banking powers that were deeply entrenched in the or merged with the British political structure. In other words, a big reason for World War I was the fear of Britain's financial elites that Germany's rising geopolitical power was going to threaten their money-making dominance. And so therefore the war is about what those elites did to try to crush Germany to preserve their own financial interests. So this is not the standard classroom narrative, what little bit they teach in schools. This is certainly not a part of it that they teach, but it is a more accurate way to interpret why the war happened, and just importantly, why the so-called peace that followed the war actually planted the seeds for an even worse war 2 decades later. So let's talk about this geopolitical power dynamic in a little more depth. Yeah, Kitty Cat's talking about the Belt and Road Initiative. Huge, plays a huge role in geopolitical affairs today. But so by the end of the 19th century, Germany had gone from being this patchwork of small states to a unified industrial giant. And since unification in 1871, it had built cutting-edge industries, steel, chemicals, engineering. So by 1914, Germany was outproducing Britain in some sectors, and they were threatening to surpass Britain in others. That's an industry. On top of that, Kaiser Wilhelm II was pouring resources into a navy to challenge the might of Britain's Royal Navy. Because for Britain to maintain their empire, that depended on their control of the seas. They had a massive, powerful navy. And so here's Germany building up a navy to rival the British Empire, and it scared them. So Britain still had the world's largest empire, but it was showing signs of strain because they were managing colonies from India all the way down to Africa. And that requires a lot of money, a lot of effort. So you've got London's policymakers. They see Germany right in Europe's heartland becoming a serious rival, kind of like the United States sees China as a serious rival. So in that sense, Britain wasn't just reacting to a diplomatic crisis of the day. What they were doing was trying to protect their position as the top power in the world. Now, I have read over the years, I agree with some of it, some I disagree with, but there's a lot of different conspiracy theories about who played what role, the Rothschilds and so forth, in bringing about the war. And so it's tempting to picture shadowy banking dynasties and corporations pulling all the strings. You've got references to the Rothschilds or maybe the old British East India Company, which by this point has been dissolved. They dissolved in 1874. But the sad fact is there's a lot of truth to these theories. Financial power was not just vested in the Rothschild banking dynasty. It was spread across multiple big families and institutions, not just the Rothschilds. But just like the New York five families, the mafia families, sure, they were competitors. But since they were kind of all in it together, it was either you hang together or you hang separately. So they stuck together for mutual benefit. That's how it was. That's what the banking families were. They were just great big mafias. But that said, the money and empire were absolutely tied together. Financial houses in London, the trading firms that depended on global markets, they had every reason to support policies that kept Britain dominant. It was in their financial interest. German competition in manufacturing and shipping, that's threatening to eat into the profits of the British corporations, which is going to hurt the bankers that are invested in those corporations because they want good returns on investment. They want to be able to continue profiting from the loans and so forth. And of course, they're loaning money like crazy to the government. Just kind of like our Federal Reserve wants to keep the United States propped up for as long as possible as the dominant power, because if we're out there waging war or we're borrowing like crazy for various programs, that's great for them. They don't care. They don't care what we're doing with it, as long as we're taking the money, putting American taxpayers on the hook for it. And that's why the United States is always giving money out to all these countries in the form of different kinds of aid, but especially military aid. We don't have the money. America doesn't have this money. We can't afford this stuff. We're running a historically high deficit, while until recently over in Israel for the last decade, they've been running a budget surplus. So if we don't have money and we have a deficit, why is it that we're giving Israel, a country that has a budget surplus, billions of dollars a year in various forms of aid? It's because it helps the bankers, the Federal Reserve bankers, and interconnected other central bankers around the world. You give the loans, you pass the money out and say, well, we'll just put the American taxpayer on the hook for this. They'll cover it. And eventually what's going to happen is we're going to have a Greece-style collapse where we're going to be so underwater, we won't be able to make these interest payments on what we owe to the Federal Reserve. Then we're going to have something like the IMF step in and bail us out. But that means gut social programs, gut retirements, do haircuts where you lop off. You just reach in, you have the U.S. government reach into the bank accounts of every American and take whatever it is, 10%, 20%, called a haircut. It's what they did in Greece. Cut all kinds of services, scale back all kinds of things, start putting up, start giving over to the IMF, national parks, historic buildings, things around the country as either collateral or as payment. It's what they did to Greece, and that's why Greece ended up with violent riots, as the people were like, screw this. But that's the plan. That's what the bankers do. So anyway, sorry, I'm starting to get off topic. I'm just saying that what was happening at this time with the British Empire is the same thing that's happening to us today. Same kind of thing. You've got this overlap of Britain's political interests and the interests of their economic elites, which, like America today, for this to happen, you have to take control of the politicians. You have to buy up the politicians like trading cards and use them as your personal puppets to enact favorable legislation. Same thing in before World War I. So when Archduke is assassinated in Sarajevo, June 1914, it sets off a chain reaction. Austria-Hungary wants to crush Serbia. Germany gives them the infamous blank check. Russia mobilizes to protect Serbia. France backs Russia. Within weeks, you've got Europe on the brink. Britain's official response for entering the war was to defend Belgium's neutrality, which Germany had violated with its invasion plan. But that's not the whole story. Behind the speeches, British leaders knew that if Germany is defeated, if Germany defeats France and Russia, they're going to dominate the continent. And that outcome would leave Britain's empire isolated, vulnerable. They would collapse. So even though the spark for this world war came out of the Balkans, the fuel for Britain's entry was this larger fear of a Europe dominated by Germany. Britain's political and financial elites, they see in this conflict the opportunity to deal a death blow to Germany, which is their chief rival, right? Okay. Skip forward to the end of World War I. When it ended in 1918, the Allies, which would be Great Britain, Russia, France, later Italy and the United States, among smaller nations, the Allies had to decide what to do with Germany. So they have this treaty called the Treaty of Versailles in 1919. It answered the question of what to do with Germany, and that was punish the hell out of them. Assign to them massive reparations, take away German territory, drastic cuts to Germany's military. Article 231, which was the most controversial part of this treaty, is called the War Guilt Clause. This forces Germany to accept full responsibility for a war that it didn't even start. So France is known for having pushed really hard for punitive measures, because remember, France and Germany are right there next to each other. They want to see, kind of like Poland today. Poland is over there on one side of Ukraine. They really want to see Russia smashed. They want to see all-out war if they can get it. Poland's going to be the trigger. If there is a trigger that kicks off World War III as a result of the Ukraine-Russia conflict, it's going to have a big role is going to be played by Poland in instigating something there. Poland wants war. But anyway, France was pushing really hard for extra punitive measures. They had been devastated by the German invasion. Britain, they need Germany to be crippled so Germany can't rise again. Economist John Maynard Keynes, he criticized the treaty almost immediately. He was like, look, this is going to wreck Germany's economy, and it's going to create dangerous instability, and there's going to be backlash from this. There's going to be blowback that you're not going to like. And he was right. The Treaty of Versailles was a diplomatic gang rape of Germany, a diplomatic gang rape of Germany's businesses, of their people. It was vicious. It wasn't just about peace. It was about making sure Germany stayed down and never got back again. It's kind of like the geopolitical equivalent of MMA fighter Raja Jackson continuing to try and knock out the teeth of that wrestler Stuart Smith, even after he's totally unconscious. Okay, this was a cowardly and vicious attack on Germany. The Allies knew it, but more importantly, the people of Germany knew that this was not just some, end of war treaty. This was personal. This was nasty. And they would not soon forget this Treaty of Versailles. From the German perspective, this so-called peace treaty, it was cruel, it was unjust, it was humiliating. Now, inside Germany, I'm just going to call it Versailles. Versailles had devastating effects. People were already demoralized by the defeat in the war. Well, now they're facing economic collapse. They're having to deal with hyperinflation, daily humiliation, knowing that their country had been branded solely responsible for this war. Middle-class families saw their life savings vanish overnight. The veterans felt betrayed. And so this atmosphere created the perfect breeding ground for extremist politics. Nationalism really started to catch hold. Nationalists railed against this Treaty of Versailles as a stab in the back, not only by the Allies, but by their own politicians. And this resentment festered. Then when the global depression hit in the 1930s, it made things so much worse that it tipped the scales toward radicalism. And that atmosphere is what permitted the rise of a Hitler. Hitler was created by the Treaty of Versailles. It was inevitable. If it wasn't Adolf Hitler, it was going to be somebody else like him. I could talk more about various speculative theories about World War I, how it was engineered to reshape global order or expand Anglo-American dominance. Talk about the role of Masonic lodges, the machinations of the Rothschild-linked groups like Cecil Rhodes' Round Table, and so on. I'm going to save that for another time. Those are fun. I enjoy talking about that, but we'll save that. If I get started on that tonight, I'll never get to my main point. So for this episode, I'm just laying the ground I'm laying the groundwork for what led to the rise of German fascism. So here we are in the decades between the two world wars. We're now into the Weimar Republic period. Germany has been devastated. Hyperinflation has set in. Let me give you an example. Before World War I, this is around 1913, 1914, the cost of a loaf of bread in Germany, their currency was called the mark. We have the dollar, they had the mark. The cost of a loaf of bread in Germany before the start of World War I was about 1/10 to 3/10 of a mark, or about 0.13 to 0.3 marks. For us, that'd be anywhere from like 13 cents to 30 cents, okay, for a loaf of bread. That's roughly, just for analogy here, of 1 mark. So what do you think a loaf of bread cost Germans in November 1924? Put it in the chat if you think you would know. We went from the fancy expensive bread was 3/10 of 1 mark, right? By November 1924, this is less than a decade later, 200 billion marks for 1 loaf of bread. 200 billion marks to buy 1 loaf of bread. The German mark had become so worthless, and I looked up some pictures of it had been a while since I had seen the photos, but you can go on Google and look up pictures of this. You'll see citizens using their stacks of currency, throwing it into their fireplaces to use as firewood because it was cheaper than using wood. Just shovels full of marks to burn. It was worthless. Before the war, this is another factoid for you. Before the war, Britain had about 8% of their military-aged men serving as either active duty or in reserve. Okay, this is before World War I. 8% of military-aged men are either active duty or reserve in the British military. In Germany, at that same time, 30% of the military-aged men were either active duty or had reserve obligations. And during the war, that figure rose to 80% of military-aged men. All right? So, massive part of the worker base. They're earning money as soldiers. But the Treaty of Versailles obliterated the German military. They had to reduce it down to just a very small number of troops. And so that throws millions of men into unemployment. At the time, you've got hyperinflation and everything. So conditions are ripe for the rise of extremism. When historians reflect on the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party, one of the most unsettling questions is this. How could, and we ask ourselves, or at least I do, and probably some of you do if you think about World War II and what happened to Germany. You wonder, how could a society of otherwise sane, morally decent, cultured people Germany was producing some incredible stuff at this time: art, architecture, movies. How did they descend into an abyss of extremism, violence, moving toward state genocide? That's what we're going to talk about in part 2 here in just a minute. So let me pause here because I want to thank anyone that has donated so far. And let's see here. Let me see if I can put on some background music for a minute. All right, so Stephen, again, thank you, Stephen Niflis, for that donation. And R Factor, thank you for yours. Mike M, please sell us the Las Vegas series. I need it. So many people ask me for the Vegas stuff. I've got to come up with something. To get material that I can put out there for folks. But there's a lot of liability issues there for me. It's Coleman gave a donation, says there's a YouTuber named Coop that does Vegas content and other things related. You should collaborate. Thank you for the donation. It's Coleman. All right, now, just going to peek here. I don't know if there have been... I don't have notifications of any other donations. So guys, we're only at $27. I don't want to sound ungrateful, but if we're going to get to those bigger prize options, support the channel. We can get a couple more. Yeah, we're at $26.99, and I hate to point this out because it makes me, when I donate through super chats to channels I like, I hate pushing that button knowing that YouTube's going to take 30%, but they do. So it's $27, but of that, 30% is going to YouTube. Kitty Cat says, is it true that Eisenhower was responsible for the Dresden mass killing, starvation, rapes of Germans after the war by Russians? I heard he hated Germans and let them suffer horribly. There's truth to that. Yeah. There is truth to that. Each of the European generals played a role in this. There was a lot of retribution, a lot of vengeance against the German people. They destroyed. After Germany was at the point where they could no longer fight back, it was just bloodlust. A lot of just destroying the culture, destroying historic architecture, buildings that had been there for centuries. Let's see, someone's asking for my PayPal. Let me put that link in there. All right, there's the PayPal link. It's paypal.me/BlackstoneIntel. I don't know how to pronounce your name, but Luvendron, thank you so much for your donation from New Zealand. Yahoo! Your first super chat on a live stream. I appreciate it. And the World Gangster, I don't know if that's what it stands for, what that's an abbreviation for. It says, I wish I could give you, deserves it. Thank you. I appreciate it. I know not everybody can do it. If my wife is watching this live stream, sometimes she watches my show when I do it. She knows I donate too much to one of my favorite people. The Cash App is, I think that dollar sign Blackstone Intel is the address. Let me check it here. Oh, no, I apologize. I gave you the wrong one. It's actually, that's what it used to be. It is now Jake Blackstone 333. All right, so the Cash App is $Jake Blackstone 333. And I don't know if you can scan that or not, but that's the QR code. Iron Man Metal, Bill, top of the food chain. God bless from Charlotte. I gotta get together with you sometime if you're down there in Charlotte. Thank you, Bill. All right, guys, we are getting a couple donations in here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This second half, we're going to be talking a little more about the transition into fascism and how that happened. And I think what I'm going to do is, if I can keep my brain focused on it, I want to talk about just the psychology of it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and stop this music here. Donation music off. Once again, if anyone wants to leave a message for Blackstone, good or bad, I know that I'll have as many threats and ugly things as positive ones, but you can call 303-900-FART. 303-900-3278 is the Blackstone hotline. All right. Hey, thank you for, hey, Nicole. Thank you so much, Nicole, for that $15 donation. It's not in the chat here because it was sent by another way, but I appreciate you so much. Thank you. And by the way, anybody who does donate the $5 or more, you are welcome to email me at jake@blackstoneintel.com. If you would like a personal thank you letter, email me, give me your address. I'd be glad to write you a letter. I'm old school. My grandmother, the judge, was constantly writing personal thank yous and letters to people, and that influenced me. It's kind of an old way. It's easier just to send a text message or something like that, but it's nice having a personal letter. In fact, somebody that I donate to myself, he was offering, I had won some prize. And I told him, look, I'd be just as happy, if you save the shipping on that. It was going to be like $8 to ship this thing. And I would, you could just throw a stamp on a letter. Just write me a personal letter. I would appreciate that. Just having a letter from you would be neat. But anyway, so let's go ahead and talk, and then at the end here we'll do this prize drawing. So this book here, The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, I'm going to be talking some about and I'll tell you something about this book. I like this book a lot, and it's not pro-Nazi or anything. It's got a swastika on the front. I don't even know if Scherer, I don't know if he's Jewish or not. Probably not. I don't know. Introduction is by Ron Rosenbaum. So, but I don't care. That I normally have this on my bookshelf back there, and at one point I realized, when this is out, up on the, sitting on my shelf, and you can see a great big swastika sitting there. For someone who doesn't know my position on stuff. They might think I'm a Nazi. They might think I'm like pro-Nazi or something. But anyway, good book. This book provides one of the most detailed historical narratives of the transformation of German society between these two world wars. So I draw a lot of information from it and other sources. Beyond the Nazi Party's political maneuvering and their violence lies a deeper psychological story. It's about the gradual polarization of German thinking that was shaped by their shared trauma, by propaganda that was used against them, by intimidation, and by the powerful dynamics of mass psychology. I come back to this more and more over the years, even though I don't talk about it a whole lot in my shows. I have really spent a lot of time since, it's been a decade now, since 2014, studying mass psychology, psychological operations, how you can persuade an entire population to vote for a certain candidate or to move a certain direction on issues like, say, Brexit or whatever. Psychological warfare has really expanded beyond. Used to be the CIA had to do stuff like, dose you with LSD or something, go through the whole MK Ultra training and get individuals. But they're having so much success these days with taking over entire populations through social media and stuff like that. Well, back at this time, there's a huge amount of propaganda that is shaping the thinking of the German people at a time when they were very vulnerable. They were in a very vulnerable state during these Weimar Republic years because they had legitimate grievances. They had true problems: the unemployment, the suffering, the hyperinflation, the humiliation, the fear that some other country could now come in and wipe them out because of their lack of military, the fact that some of their own people, German nationals, that are still living in the territories that had been sliced off by the Treaty of Versailles and given to other nations. Now they're looking at their German people are now facing persecution there by some of the ethnic groups of the Slavs and some others. So this transformation of German society, it didn't happen overnight, but it did happen fairly quickly. The radicalization unfolded layer by layer as collective wounds from World War I and the Treaty of Versailles created this fertile ground for extremist narratives. You've got consistent exposure to propaganda that is reinforced by intimidation from the paramilitary groups operating in Germany. Today, here in the United States, it's not so much that we have paramilitary groups, although you do have like the Proud Boys and others, but that's not that big of a deal in comparison to Germany, where they are dealing with the brown shirts, for example. Instead, what we have are we have social media influencers. We have on the left, the far left, you've got their influencers, and over on the right, we've got influencers on this side spewing propaganda. The chief propagandist is in the White House. And that, more than anything else, is what is promulgating this propaganda and radicalizing. But anyway, you've got these ordinary Germans who didn't have extremist thinking. They were average people. If you consider yourself an average American, you just kind of go about your day, do your work, whatever. Those kinds of people in Germany started learning first to accept, but then to embrace increasingly radical viewpoints because of the circumstances of society. So to understand this descent, we have to look not only at the events themselves, but also the psychological processes that made these events so effective and the propaganda so effective. At the roots of Germany's polarization was the Treaty of Versailles, the 1919 treaty we've been talking about. Because it not only stripped Germany of territory, military capacity, but it also forced the people to accept sole responsibility for the war. From a psychological perspective, this creates a national identity crisis. The collective ego of the German people was wounded. And with that wounded pride came resentment and humiliation and a desire for redemption. And we see this a bit with what's going on with the alt-right. Trump supporters, they've really had it hard this year because Trump has just screwed everything up. The ICE raids, the economy, the whole Epstein scandal, bombing Iran, being a bootlicker for Israel, pulling out the chair for Netanyahu. I mean, he has really made it hard to feel pride. Now, they'll express pride. Yeah, Trump waved their flags and all that, but it's been far more muted than it was in the past because it's been really hard. Research in clinical psychology shows that humiliation is one of the most powerful motivators for radical behavior. When you feel humiliated, you're more likely to act out. When an individual or a group feels degraded or stripped of dignity, if they feel powerless, they'll often respond by seeking out aggressive or extreme ways to restore their status. That's partly what we're seeing with this mass reporting of Democrats right now by the Charlie Kirk people, trying to get everybody fired. They're responding in ways, aggressive ways, that they think restores their sense of control. Also feels good to them to exert some vengeance. Well, in post-war Germany, this dynamic played out on a national scale. Economic collapse, hyperinflation in the early 20s, all of that magnified this sense of victimhood that the German people felt. So by the early 1930s, when the Great Depression left millions of people unemployed, the population is primed for a message that promises a restoration of dignity, revenge against those responsible. Have you heard this message before? I will be your retribution. Have you heard any demagogues promise this restoration of dignity and revenge? The National Socialist German Workers' Party, the NSDAP, they provided the German people that very message. Now, let me just quickly say this. Anytime I talk about the Nazis, I piss people off because I call them Nazis instead of saying the National Socialists or the National Socialist German Workers' Party. Listen, I'm just going to say Nazis for brevity. Yes, Nazi is a derogatory nickname for the National Socialists, just like Sozi was a nickname for Germany's Social Democrats. But Nazi is the term I'm going to use. Everybody's familiar with it. It's short. It's easy to say. And if that upsets you, you're just going to have to deal with it, okay? Furthermore, as I go through the rise of fascism in Germany, I want my audience to think of parallels that we're seeing in America today. That does not mean that I'm trying to say that Trump supporters are Nazis. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that I recognize an alarming amount of similarities between Germany of yesterday and America today. Fascism is definitely growing rapidly in the United States under the despotism of Donald Trump. So I'm not saying that you're a Nazi. I'm not one of these Democrats saying, Republicans are Nazis. But there are parallels here in the evolving view of what is acceptable in America. Because prior to Donald Trump taking office, when people were still excited to make him president, the dominant belief system of Republicans was small government. You don't use the government to attack the people. You don't infringe on the rights of the people. The Constitution is sacred. You don't infringe on rights like the First Amendment right to freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms, rights like freedom from unreasonable searches and seizures, stuff like that. Okay, that was the attitude before Trump took office. Now we have massive crackdowns on students all across the country because they dare to criticize Israel. Students here on visas are being deported. College professors, college administrators are being fired if they don't conform with federal government mandates to crack down on free speech. The fact that we have ICE going around stopping random people based not on any warrant, any finding of fact, any probable cause, but because of the way that they look, grabbing people off the street, people, armed thugs wearing masks who are not identifying themselves, grabbing U.S. citizens in some cases off the streets, throwing them in unmarked vehicles and speeding off. I would say that's a violation of some of our constitutional rights, wouldn't you? Fascism is the view that you need a strong man. I don't mean like physically strong, but the term strong man. You need a tough guy who's willing to do whatever it takes, even if that means fudging on the law. You invest in him your trust. You give Senator Palpatine, now Chancellor Palpatine, power to create a grand army of the Republic because he promises as soon as the threat is gone, he'll lay those powers down and give up the power you have ceded to him, right? Which was, George Lucas wrote that based on the rise of Hitler and how as Chancellor he basically became a dictator. Okay, that's what a fascist system requires. It's hyper patriotic, hyper nationalistic. And we are seeing the rise of those kinds of attitudes. We're seeing a shift among it's not that the left is shifting into that. When they shift, it's typically the other direction. But on the right, the threat, the risk is a shift towards fascism. And we're seeing that. We're seeing the mobs. They're not wearing brown shirts yet. They haven't formed paramilitaries outside of, some of the small groups like the Proud Boys in the first Trump administration. But we see them mobilizing in social media, forming groups and everything. So it's a trend. It's a trend. Now, again, if this comparison offends you, you're just going to have to deal with it, okay? As one of your alt-right messiahs is so fond of saying, facts don't care about your feelings. And as another one said, if you don't agree with my position on this, prove me wrong. Okay? So into this wounded psychological landscape of post-World War II Germany steps the Nazi Party. They have got a propaganda machine unlike anything modern politics had ever seen. Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's minister of propaganda, recognized that people in distress don't want nuance. I was talking at the top of the show about how you got to look at both sides and blah, 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 blah. When you're in distress, you don't want that crap. You want simple, emotionally satisfying answers. So when people on Twitter have been asking me my views on things, I'm like, oh, okay, well, this is this. I've been shocked at some of them, the responses. How dare you say that, Jake? It's just simple. It's this, this, and this. I'm like, I'm not emotionally charged and inflamed and upset in the way that you are. And so I see it differently. I see a more balanced view here. The Democrats did this. No, they didn't. In America, we had the Obama years. And during those Obama years, conservatives, especially Christian conservatives, were powerless to stop radical change. Massive historic upheavals in our traditional social order. I was among the people concerned and talking about it. We had a president who not only praised gay pride, but lit up the White House in the colors of the rainbow gay pride flag, which was a major slap in the face to people in the country who were offended by that. Christian bakers, for example, losing court battles, being sued and losing in court because they committed the heinous crime, the heinous sin of refusing to adorn wedding cakes with homosexual messaging and imagery. They wouldn't put the two men standing together on the top of the cake. And they were punished for that. And something that was once assumed unthinkable, the U.S. Supreme Court rules that and this is at a time when states, individual U.S. states, their state bodies were voting, either in the legislatures or in referendums. People were voting to define marriage in their states as only being between a man and a woman. And yet here comes the Supreme Court that overrules all of that. It says U.S. states can no longer decide for themselves whether to endorse gay marriage. Gay marriage is now the supreme law of the land. Everyone has to go along with it. So on the international level, that's domestically. On the international level, you've got the Obama administration, including the much despised Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, followed by John Kerry, toppling governments like Libya, cackling about the brutal murder of Muammar Gaddafi. You've got Hillary and Obama and others supporting the rise of terrorist groups in Syria and Iraq, which included Al-Qaeda, groups like Al-Nusra, who morph into ISIS. And the USA is supporting this and arming these people, going on mass murder sprees, decapitating hundreds of people at a time. So you've got non-interventionist Republicans feeling powerless during the Obama years to rein in their government. Okay, so we're setting the stage here. From the time that Obama took over around 2008 up through 2016, conservatives, Christians, people on the right feel powerless. And into this vacuum steps a political opportunist. He had started but failed to obtain the presidency twice before. Not a lot of people know that Donald Trump had dipped his toes in the water and tried to get into the White House twice before, but failed so early on. He's so averse to the image of him losing that he'd quickly, when he saw, okay, this is not going to, I have no chance here, he'd back out. But here comes Donald Trump, a New York City liberal with a string of bankruptcies, a history of advocating and financing far-left liberal policies like partial birth abortion, great friends with the Clintons. Here comes this guy who is and I just saw today something about Donald Trump talking about George Soros ought to be jailed or something like that. Really, Donald? Because when Donald Trump took $350 million from George Soros around 2008, he wasn't saying that Soros needed to be put in jail then. In 2012, when Donald Trump was out there giving speeches to Tea Party rallies, because he was thinking about running for president back then, I guess it was 2010, 2012 when he was looking into running again. There's a video of him on the stage telling people in the crowd to leave Soros alone, to stop criticizing Soros. That was not the guy who was going to win the Republican nomination, folks. And so Donald Trump was linked up through his financiers with his own version of Joseph Goebbels, a master propagandist named Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon had his finger on the pulse of the Republican Party, the conservatives. He knew what they wanted to see, and he taught Donald Trump how to talk. And so Donald Trump shifted, not because he had a big change of heart on these issues, but because he wanted to win, and he knew what he needed to say because Steve Bannon told him. And so he changed his politics. He found those things that worked, and he comes out. Battle lines are drawn very clearly. It was the God-fearing, red-blooded Christians and the constitutional patriots in a fight to the death against the leftist social justice warriors, those blue-haired SJWs, the Starbucks latte sipping beta cucks, right? You've got them. And then you've got, on the enemy side, the marauding rapists and drug dealers and murderers that were flooding across America's southern border. So it's the Christians and the patriots against the SJWs, the libtards, and these dastardly illegal Mexicans. And this Trump-Bannon message resonated. Remember, we're comparing the psychological state of 1930s Germany, where the people feel helpless, powerless. They see things happening contrary to their will, and they seem to have no ability to do it. In 2016, there were a dozen different Republicans running for office. One of them was Rand Paul. But no one could do the messaging and feel that strongman persona like Donald Trump, who was an actor. He was experienced at this. He had spent his whole life crafting an image. And so people said, you know, we don't care that he's New York City liberal. We don't care that he has been a registered Democrat much of his life. We don't care that he wanted Oprah to be his running mate when he ran for president previously, which is true. In fact, it's even in one of his books. He wrote in his books, if I could choose a running mate, it would be Oprah. That Donald Trump disappeared. Steve Bannon helped to make that Donald Trump disappear. So the people hear this new thing. We are being assaulted. We are being invaded. We are going to put an end. I'm going to lock up Hillary Clinton. We are going to build this wall. We're going to make Mexico pay for it. Trump, Trump, Trump. USA, USA. It was very, very good. Very good messaging, the way that they did it. Now, don't get triggered, but I'm going to start talking again about Germany. I have to talk about their leader, who was Hitler. Okay, Hitler himself had mastered this psychological tactic. Instead of addressing Germany's problems with complexity, he reduced them to stark binaries. It was Germany versus enemies. The Nazi worldview painted politics as this existential struggle. The Aryan race was in a live or die fight against the Jews and the communists and the degeneracy of democracy itself. And so this framing exploited a well-known cognitive bias in psychology. It's called in-group, out-group thinking. Because once people accept that premise, this binary, they then begin to perceive their own identities and their own survival as tied to the group. And if the group is defeated, their identity as an individual, their individual survival is at risk. You see all of this performance mourning going on for Charlie Kirk? I'm sure a lot of people feel strongly about it, but it's this in-group, out-group thinking. It is the sense that they got one of our guys, a prominent figure. They're coming for all of us. They're coming for me. My survival, my identity is threatened. And so you've got this mob mentality right now. And we've seen this since 2016 in general, haven't we? I mean, look at MAGA. If you dare question anything that Donald Trump has proposed, even if it conflicts with long-established Republican principles and policies, they brand you as a traitor. They kick you out. You're a Hillary lover. Or worst of all, you're a libtard suffering from the fatal disease of Trump derangement syndrome. Folks out there in the chat, if you have not been accused of having TDS by someone in social media, you have probably not been speaking out loud enough, because everybody gets accused of having TDS. You were either in MAGA, you're either all in or you are all out. There is no in between. There is no nuance. And so the very identities of the once pretty diverse Republican Party, you had the kind of left of center, you had the moderates, you had the conservatives, you had the ultra-conservatives, you had the libertarians. It was kind of a big tent. There were even the log cabin gay Republicans. You know, the party used to be pretty broad. Not anymore. The identity of of what is an acceptable Republican became narrow, merged into a single identity, an identity that was determined by Trump himself, which was difficult at times because the positions that Donald Trump took on things like, for example, DACA, the dreamers, immigrants, views on stuff like that were ever changing. One week he'd say, oh yeah, we absolutely cannot give any kind of pathway to citizenship for these kids that were born of illegal aliens here in America. And then the next week he'd say, oh yeah, we absolutely do need to have something like DACA. Back and forth. And he was like that on gun control. Oh yeah, I'll protect your right to bear arms, no infringement. Followed by, okay, we need red flag laws. Or his infamous statement there to Mike Pence on camera, I don't care about due process. You take the guns first, worry about their constitutional rights second. I mean, that's out of his own mouth on camera. You can't miss it. So the identity of what is an acceptable Republican became one thing. Because it was not based on principles. It wasn't based on policies. It was based on one thing, and that was utter loyalty to the leader. If he vacillates and moves over here, you move with him. If you're out there saying, I'm so glad he takes this position and I'll fight to the death to defend this position, and then he flip-flops and takes the opposite position, your job, if you're a loyal Republican, is to migrate over there, shut the hell up about this, and now start talking about this. That's what became of the Republican Party. It became a cult. It became a political cult surrounding one person. You were either in line with Trump on all things, or you were not part of the group, and therefore you were an enemy. Propaganda, repeated endlessly, functioned as a form of classic conditioning in the 1930s in the same way. Germany, just like America today, went through this same thing. You had, if you go back, look at the historical photos of Germany in the 1930s. You've got the Nazi posters, you've got the rallies, you've got radio speeches, all hammering home the same central themes over and over again. We were betrayed by the Jews. We were humiliated by Versailles. Our democratic leaders are weak, and we need to get rid of them. Over here, we have the Trump rallies. We have the MAGA hats that unites everybody, right? You all have to look the same. You have to dress the same. You have to go out and buy that hat and wear it so that everybody knows you're in. You're part of the in group. And of course, you have at every rally grifters hawking this merchandise. And not just at the rallies. I don't know where, if you guys have these everywhere around the country, but certainly here in North Carolina, around the South, you've got roadside stands all over the place. People, there with their pickup trucks, they set up their little tent. They've got all their Trump flags and everything. In places like Gatlinburg, Tennessee, tourist sites, you've got entire Trump stores selling nothing but merch. In fact, I think they featured one of those in a South Park episode. Like, it's hardcore. You got to be in. You got to wear the gear. You got to identify. You got to be in the group. And the messaging of Trump, make America great again. This is a campaign slogan that he stole from the 1980 Reagan presidential campaign. He didn't come up with that. That was Reagan's campaign slogan in 1980 when he ran for president, make America great again. But Trump modified the slogan to include this central theme that to make America great again, the way you do that is that you have to unite against the enemies of freedom, namely the Democrats and the Mexican immigrants. And over time, these ideas, now that's not to say that there wasn't a problem. Yeah, we had then, and we continue to have a problem with illegal immigration. I get it. I'm not disagreeing with that. But never before did we see immigrants as like the enemy. It was a problem. There was a problem with illegal immigration, but we didn't view them as rapists and drug lords and murderers. Okay, it was reframed because just saying, oh yeah, we've got this problem, we need proper policies to address it. That's not something that works very well to inflame people. You have to make the people evil. And that's what energized MAGA in the first term. So over time, these ideas bypassed rational scrutiny in Germany. These crazy things they're hearing from the Nazi Party. And they became ingrained reflexes in Germany, just like in America today. The repetition of the same things over and over and over, build the wall, created what psychologists call the illusory truth effect. This is a tendency to believe something simply because it is heard over and over and over. So was the shooter of Charlie Kirk a Democrat? No, but despite all the evidence refuting this claim, this was not because he's a Democrat. At this point, it looks like a big reason is that he, despite coming from a conservative Republican Christian family in a red state, growing up doing hunting and stuff like that, that after he moved out, looks like he got in with, into this trans stuff and then started adopting some of the ideology that he's learning from either this partner or what he's getting from the message boards, stuff like that. But this would have been a fairly recent transition in this kid's ideology because he was not like this growing up. There's videos out there of high school students talking about how, oh yeah, in high school he wasn't like this. In fact, he used to be pro-Trump at one point, but he shifted over time. But the idea that Donald Trump is promulgating, that it's the radical left that killed Charlie Kirk rather than a nutcase kid. I mean, we don't. It's certain things are accepted by the group that are beyond dispute. The Democrats wanted Charlie Kirk dead, and they have to pay for it. You have to see the enemy in black and white. And it was the same in Germany, except it was the Jews. The Jews were responsible for the destruction and subjugation of Germany. Not to say there wasn't a role played by powerful Jewish interests. There certainly was. Can't deny that. But to broad brush all Jewish people, kind of like today, all Democrats are being blamed for the death of Charlie Kirk. It's not fair. It's not right. Any more than if tomorrow, if some Republican kid was to go out and shoot a Democrat, kill some Democrat influencer. Are you responsible for that? What if the Democrats get all inflamed and big fury, the kind of stuff we're seeing right now, and you are being blamed in social media? And maybe it was someone like Hillary Clinton. Do you think that if Hillary Clinton was assassinated, do you think that MAGA would celebrate? Of course they would. Not everyone. Certainly not everyone. But there would be a lot of them. Just kind of like when Charlie Kirk gets killed, there's a lot of these left-wingers that are celebrating. It's disgusting. It's deplorable. But it doesn't represent everyone. If someone were to shoot Hillary Clinton, who happens to be Republican, do you want to be blamed for that? No. And this is where it gets back to that. You don't have, in times of extreme fear, there is no nuance. It's us versus them. Us versus them. So Hitler conditioned the German people to see the average Jewish shop owner as an imminent threat to the security of Germany. Just like Trump is conditioning his followers to see the Democrats as existential threats. Not to that degree. Certainly not to that degree. But there are similarities. It got bad there in Germany, where the Germans were going around to Jewish shops and just busting out their windows and destroying their businesses and everything. People who had nothing to do with anything. They hadn't done anything wrong. So in this book, Schurer documents how this fragile Weimar Republic, plagued by weak coalitions, constant crises, they gradually lost their centrist parties in parliament. And into this void, the Germans increasingly faced a stark choice. You could either have enslavement due to communist revolution, because you got the Bolshevik Jews over in the Soviet Union, and you've got a small but growing, largely Jewish-dominated Communist Party inside of the Reichstag, the German parliament. So you can either have enslavement to the Jews and their communism, or you can have freedom that comes from Nazi nationalism preserved by Aryan Germans. The line is drawn. Us versus them. So from a psychological standpoint, this binary fostered radicalization by polarizing the people. When people when people perceive only two viable options, their loyalties are going to shift toward the extremes, toward the fringes. Each side is going to demonize the other. Compromise becomes unthinkable. Social identity theory explains that once people get to that point, once they adopt a political identity as central to their self-concept, who they are, what they are, they filter information to support that identity. And it leads to confirmation bias. It leads to deeper polarization. You don't want to see the inconvenient truths or the facts that might conflict with your big theory. And the Nazis exploited this perfectly. They presented themselves as the only alternative to communism. They captured the fearful middle-class workers who would otherwise would not have embraced fascism. In fact, early on, the Nazis struggled to gain seats in the parliament. Sorry, I think I had water go down the wrong way. The Nazis were not winning seats, not many, not early on. But they were there, and they were agitating, and they were trying. In fact, in the election prior to Hitler becoming the dictator, they were actually losing seats. The Nazi Party was losing seats in the elections. But then Hitler, once he had ultimate power, he banned all rival political parties so that you could only be Nazi. And then the German people had to get in line. Then the moderates that were still holding out, you get in line or you get killed. So this is the atmosphere. Moderate Germans, once wary of extremism, they start sliding toward the right inch by inch until they found themselves endorsing policies that they would have rejected just a couple of years earlier. And we see that in America. When Trump first came along, the goals of the Make America Great Again movement were pretty clear. Avoid foreign wars, avoid foreign conflicts, make America great again, not make Israel great again. Stay here. Get out of Syria, get out of Afghanistan, get out of Iraq. Okay, that was one thing. Next, you got to deal with illegal immigration by building a wall and make Mexico pay for it. Another thing, shrink the federal government and rebuild the U.S. economy into an economic powerhouse. Remember, this is a businessman, a successful billionaire. And then one of the other big things was save the children from the evil Democrats who were engaged in child sex trafficking and cannibalism and harvesting them for adrenochrome. But once the two Trump presidencies unfolded, what happened to the Trump supporters? Did they maintain those positions? No, because their leader betrayed them on every single point. Trump dramatically increased military actions in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Syria. He didn't end any war. He carried out acts of war himself against Yemen, against Iran, in both terms, not for the benefit of America, but for to please the state of Israel, whose backers had financed Trump's presidential campaigns. Did MAGA turn against Trump on this? No, they either remained silent at worst, or they embraced it. Trump barely made an effort in his first term to build the southern border wall. He completed almost no new border wall beyond what previously existed. Mexico didn't pay a penny of it. At the end of Trump's term, were the Trump supporters saying, "We are so disappointed you didn't fulfill your central campaign promise"? No. They all pretended like they had never talked about this wall to begin with. Or, even more bizarre, they all just accepted that the wall had been built, even though it hadn't been built. Ask most Trump supporters and they will tell you he built the wall, even though his own administration and to this day confirms, no, the wall actually wasn't built. He endorsed a pathway to citizenship for millions of illegals in America. Did they call him out on that? No. He called for stricter gun control. Did they turn against him on that? No. They came around to his way. In his first term, what did he do? He, Donald Trump, is responsible for speeding the COVID vaccine past normal safety trials. His mishandling of the whole COVID mess plunged America into an economic downturn. In his second term, things have gotten worse by his chaotic tariff wars that have decimated segments of the U.S. economy. You've got farmers and others out there begging for handouts from the government to save them. Everyone knows that prices are up in every area. Unemployment has increased. You've got a lot of small businesses that have gone under, and it's getting ready to get a whole lot worse. You've got Donald Trump serving the interests of Israel at every turn. Most notably, he has engaged in what to me is the thing that, if this isn't going to turn MAGA against him, nothing will. He has engaged in an overt, brazen cover-up on behalf of the Epstein Child Network for the benefit of people like Ghislaine Maxwell and the powerful predators of children that are in that network. In both of his administrations, instead of going after the sex traffickers, what did he do? He promoted some of them, or at least people adjacent, lawyers and people connected to Epstein, promoted them to be leaders in the Trump administration. In any other time in U.S. history, Republicans would have revolted against their president if they had been so brazenly betrayed by him. And I know this is true because George H.W. Bush, when he ran, his was the first campaign I worked on in 1988. His central promise was no new taxes. In the debates, he made this big dramatic, the Democrats are going to try and get me to do new taxes. And they're going to push, and they're going to push. And I'm going to say, read my lips, no new taxes. That was his build the wall promise, no new taxes. Well, when he's president, the Democrat-controlled Congress passes this fairly mild gas tax increase. The legislation goes to the White House, and he signs it into law. And that was it. That one act doomed Bush's reelection. Republicans turned against him en masse. It was a gas tax increase. That was it. And that was enough for Republicans to say, nope, we're done with you. We are not loyal to you. We're loyal to the principle of no new taxes. You promised us. You wouldn't do it. You did it. You're gone. They preferred to stay home and not vote for Bush than to go vote for him because they were so mad about that. I remember that very well. But Donald Trump, he has stabbed his supporters in the back on every major issue, and they still suck up to him and do anything he wants. Not because Trump is so great, but because they have this group thinking mentality and they don't want to be kicked out of the group. That's how it was among the Nazis. The people became radicalized. It became identity. You have to stick together. You have to stick together. And you don't want to step aside, because if you do, you get destroyed. Today in social media, you start to step out of line, you get destroyed. Charlie Kirk, the people talking about how Charlie Kirk was starting to turn against Israel. He wasn't starting to turn against Israel, but he did raise some issues, a little bit of nuance, and his own people started turning against him and attacking him for not being completely loyal in every sense to Israel. That's what I'm talking about. That's the extremism. People out there today are like, oh yeah, you criticize Charlie Kirk and we're going to destroy you. Well, guess what? I posted on Twitter, I reposted something that Laura Loomer had written about Charlie Kirk just a couple months ago, calling him a traitor. He was a traitor to the MAGA movement and Donald Trump. Couldn't be trusted. He stabbed Trump in the back. This is Charlie Kirk, who is, he's on board with everything with Trump. Is anyone going to go attack Laura Loomer over her criticism of Charlie Kirk? Wish they would. Anyway, today's Republicans happily look the other way as their leader does things like having the U.S. Congress recessed early to stop them from voting to subpoena sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell. If Obama had done that, if Biden had done that, we'd hear no end of it. Then Trump goes and sends his personal attorney to work out a deal in secret with Maxwell, letting her flip-flop over to a more cushy prison. And he's talking about how he, floating the idea of pardoning her. And all of this is to help Trump and to help the Epstein network. Why have Republicans become both so unprincipled, weak, and cowardly like this? It's because they've been brainwashed with propaganda, just like the Germans of the 1930s. Brainwashed into believing that they are in an existential crisis and their only salvation is to cede their will over to the strongman who promises to fight their enemies for them. And if that means that they have to temporarily compromise their principles or simply choose to look the other way when the leader violates his promises, that's the price you have to pay to be saved. If Nazi propaganda seduced the mind, intimidation by the SA and the SS crushed resistance. Shearer talks about the Nazi brown shirts. These are the SA, Sturmabteilung. These are street thugs who are, the way the Nazis framed it is they are our warriors fighting the communists and pitch battles on the streets. But what they did was they'd go around like the Proud Boys. What the brown shirts did was they walked around breaking up the political rallies of opposition parties, whacking people with sticks to disperse other people there to see a different candidate. They terrorized local neighborhoods. It wasn't just random violence. This was psychological theater. The message was clear. Opposition carries consequences. You don't mess with us. This is so in Trump's first term, we had the rapid rise of we already had militia groups, but you have the rise of more vocal Western militia groups. You have groups of rabble-rousers like the Proud Boys going around the streets looking for Antifa or whoever to fight with. Now in Trump's second term, we've got a vast network of social media mobs that are scouring social media posts, trying to find anyone who has criticized Charlie Kirk so that MAGA cancel culture can contact their employers, put them on a list, put them on the website, have everyone harass the employers to try and get them to cut off these people's income sources. Then in Congress, you've got the Trumpian legislatures who are all clamoring to outdo each other to create laws that not only ban critics of Charlie Kirk or people that maybe celebrated his death, cut them out of social media for life. These are the same people. Republicans, we have been on and I'm talking about people that lean right. I'm not registered Republican, but if I have to be lumped in with one side or another, I'm always going to be lumped in over on this side more so than with the Democrats. We have been so marginalized, persecuted, harassed, silenced in social media, whether it's YouTube, Facebook, everywhere else, for years now. It's not a good feeling. But that's the answer of the Republican Party today is do it to them. Let's silence them. Let's strip them of their professional licenses. Let's destroy them financially. In clinical terms, this is operant conditioning, except on a societal scale. Operant conditioning is a type of associative learning where behaviors are either strengthened or weakened based on the consequences tied to them. So behaviors followed by pleasant outcomes, positive reinforcement, become more likely to occur, while behaviors that are followed by some form of unpleasant outcome or punishment becomes less likely. So many people have been pointing out that Charlie Kirk recently expressed some shock and dismay that about all this backlash he got because he seemed to be not quite as loyal to Israel as he's supposed to. So he's talking in a podcast to Megyn Kelly. Said, look, all I did was try and express a little nuance. And that resulted in masses of people, including some of the people now who are like shedding the crocodile tears over his death. Some of these are the same people that were attacking him just a couple of weeks ago, calling him an anti-Semite. He was surprised at this. Well, this is what Trump has created for his MAGA followers. You have to have an echo chamber of self-righteous reinforcement that cannot tolerate the least degree of internal criticism or questioning. If anyone dares to offer, as Kirk did, any kind of nuanced look at an issue or engage in any kind of critical thinking, the mob coalesces and forces that person back into line. And if the person persists in being contrary, you have to expel them from the group because they have TDS and you don't want that virus to spread. You treat that person who up until that point was your friend and ally, you now treat them as the enemy. Just like, Laura Loomer with her message in July, saying, and the thing that she was so pissed off about is because Charlie Kirk had a guest on his, whatever he did, his podcast or video show, whatever Charlie Kirk did. He had a guest on, and this particular guest had criticized Donald Trump for attacking Iran, right? That's not an extreme thing to attack Trump about. But he criticized Trump because he carried out the stealth bomber attacks on Iran. Charlie Kirk had this guy on. That's not what they were talking about. They were talking about other issues. But that's what Laura Loomer said is he stabbed Trump in the back and he's not real MAGA. We need to get rid of Charlie Kirk. She called him an opportunist. Because all he did was he talked to somebody who had been critical of Trump. That is psychotic. That is extreme. But that is also typical of MAGA. But all of this kind of thinking, this is also classic religious cult conditioning. It works the same way. So in Germany, those who resisted the Nazi ideology, they faced punishment. Those who embraced it were rewarded with safety or social approval. They'd get things like, there were medals for, there's like Nazi medals like this. There were some for military, but they also had civilian medals for being a good Nazi. So you had social reward, you had social punishment based on whether or not you were in line with the party line. The SS, the Schutzstaffel, they initially were Hitler's bodyguard unit, but they took intimidation to the next level. They started operating with ruthless discipline. After the Night of Long Knives in 1934, this is when the SS purged the brown shirt, the SA leadership, and kind of took it over. The SS became the central enforcers of Nazi terror, instilling fear not only in opponents, but also in any Nazi members themselves, the average people, who might find themselves wavering. So when I look at these videos I've seen in the last few days, Crystal knocked. When I see some of these videos that have come out from the Trump mobs descending on hecklers, it's in terrible taste to go around to like one of these vigils for Charlie Kirk and yell, F Charlie Kirk. Terrible taste. Very rude, very provocative. You got to be a dummy to think you can go into the middle of that and not get attacked. Like, it's just common sense. Doesn't mean that you deserve to be beaten, though. Just kind of like Charlie Kirk had to know. You go onto college campuses, liberal bastions, and you berate transgender ideology. What do you think's going to happen? Does anyone have the right to attack you? Absolutely not. But is it likely that sooner or later someone is going to attack you? Yes. Doesn't mean it's his fault, but it does mean he wasn't careful. Likewise, it is not the fault of some of these people going around yelling the stupid things at these vigils. You don't have the right to take these people because they say something you don't like. Words don't hurt you, or they shouldn't. You don't have the right to form a mob, throw the person on the ground, and kick them over and over and over, and punch them and pummel them as an angry mob. But that's what's happening in some cases. Very much like what they did in the 30s in Germany. Not cool. Fear is one of the most powerful tools of social control. Research in trauma psychology shows that if you are repeatedly exposed to fear-inducing stimuli, that's going to reshape your behavior and actually has physical changes. It reshapes your neural pathways. In Nazi Germany, you see the presence of these uniformed Nazis walking around, and it was intimidating. More and more, we've got U.S. troops carrying automatic weapons on the streets of America. Do you think that's not intimidating? It is, and it is intended to intimidate. And it's also blatantly unconstitutional. You cannot deploy the U.S. military into Chicago. I mean, there's an argument for D.C. because it's a district, but all of these threats to send them into Memphis, and certainly sending them into L.A., threats to go into Chicago, all of this stuff, it's meant to intimidate. These are the tactics of a fascist leader. And Republicans, guys out there that are if you're pro-Trump, fine, be pro-Trump. But you can also be pro-Constitution. And when he does something that violates your principles, speak out. Have the courage to speak out, even if that means the group may say, we're going to kick you out. Fine, be kicked out. There's a group of us here in the reasonable center who are not under the intellectual control of these political mobs. Same with the left. If you're on the left, leave that Democrat Party. These people are crazy. Leave it. Come join us as independents. Think for yourself. Make up your own mind. Don't let a party tell you what to think and believe. Anyway, what is the most chilling, I think, about Germany's descent into extremism is how ordinary it seemed when it was happening. People were not like, holy crap, do you know, we've just changed as a society. People were not waking up one morning and going, hey, you know what, today I think I'm going to embrace totalitarianism. It was incremental. People didn't recognize it was happening to them. Republicans, it's happening, and you're not seeing it. One reason you're not seeing it is that the people pointing it out are the people on the left. Your enemies, your political enemies are saying, fascist, fascist. Yeah, fine. I understand why you don't want to hear it from them, but I'm not one of them. I was a Republican strategist, a die-hard Republican for much of my life. Blood, sweat, and tears poured into electing Republican candidates. I could tell you stories upon stories of Republican leaders, names I know you would recognize that I've worked with. I am telling you, what's happening to the Republican Party is a descent into fascism. You have to draw back from this and start taking a stand. Don't be loyal to Trump. Be loyal to correct political principles. And if Trump is in line with those principles, cheer him on. If he is out of step with those principles, tell him to get back in line, or there will be consequences. You will not support him. You will not support his choices for political office. You won't support his agenda. You'll speak out against him. Don't be tools of tyranny. Psychologists refer to this whole process as, they call it foot in the door, the foot in the door phenomenon. Because once people accept small changes, they're more likely to accept larger ones. So the Nazis first normalized violence against their political opponents, right? Why, Germany didn't used to be okay with political violence, but then, okay, we can see why this is necessary, because if we it's not great, but we do need the SS or the SA or later the SS to get out there and keep things straight for social order. We need this to keep the communist Jews from destroying us. They certainly tried, and look how bad things have gotten. We can't let that happen again. So a little bit of political violence. Foot in the door. They get you to go against something that you initially would have opposed. For example, MAGA. Cancel culture is something you used to speak out against. You used to make fun of the triggered SJW snowflakes who would get so upset you would tell them, F your feelings. Facts don't care about your feelings. Give me some more liberal tears. I love it. That's what I drink. That's all the stuff you used to say, right? When they would freak out and try and cancel people because they didn't like their ideas. They got offended. Well, guess who the ones are out there now filling cups with their tears and crying and I got to go get this person fired because he said something I don't like. Who are the ones out there? And there's tons of messages, tons and tons and tons of messages from the right talking about that's it, we're done. We're going to do whatever it takes at this point. Some people are talking about blood. There's radicalization going on. You got to stop it now. If you're in a group and one of your people is starting to talk crazy like that, call them out on it. Say, hey, I know you're pissed, but we need to be peaceful. After the Nazis had succeeded in normalizing violence against their political opponents, then it became the Jews as a whole. Then you have the rise of legalized discrimination. Then you have the pogroms. Then this all leads toward step by step, incrementally, toward industrial scale genocide. Each step was justified along the way. It's necessary for national survival. We have to do this. Same on the American side. Do you know that we had concentration camps here in the United States. We just rounded up all of the Japanese Americans and tossed them in there. Did you know that both Mr. Miyagi from Karate Kid and Mr. Sulu from Star Trek, as kids, both spent time living in American concentration camps? They weren't forced labor camps in the way that they had them over in Europe. But still, we rounded up people who had committed no crime. They were U.S. citizens. We rounded them up. We put them in big buildings, surrounded them with barbed wire fences, and had armed guards there to shoot them if they tried to get out. In America. And during World War II, we started concentration camps over there. We rounded up German soldiers, and including a lot of people who are not soldiers. They just looked like they could be German soldiers. We put them in there and we starved them to death. Allied troops committed incredible atrocities against the German people that rivaled a lot of the stuff that the Germans had done. Groupthink also plays a crucial role in radicalization. In mass rallies and workplaces, even families, dissent becomes socially unacceptable. We're humans. We are hardwired for conformity. There are experiments like those of Solomon Asch that demonstrate that people will deny their own perceptions in order to align with a group. So in 1930s Germany, this conformity was amplified by fear, propaganda, nationalist fervor. And we're seeing that here as well. From a clinical psychology perspective, Nazi radicalization of German society can be understood through different mechanisms. There was trauma and vulnerability. This is where you got the collective trauma of war, economic collapse, all of this mess we've been talking about. People in distress are more susceptible to authoritarian solutions that promise security, right? So Republicans are in fear. Democrats, here's the problem. Republicans are in fear. You keep persecuting the Democrats, you keep doing these ICE raids, you keep putting U.S. military into cities, all of this stuff, you make them feel helpless, you make them feel unheard, like they have no voices, no power in government. They are going to become radicalized. They are going to start doing a lot more than what we've seen so far. We're going to have a return to cities being set on fire. We're going to have a return to Antifa groups out there. We're going to have more political assassinations. Because let's be honest, a lot of them are already pretty unhinged. They don't need to be pushed very far, and you guys are pushing them. You're stoking the flames here. So we've got both sides feel like they have gone from here and they've been pushed out to the sides, and they both Republicans and Democrats on the fringes feel like this is a fight for survival, and so extremism becomes acceptable. Okay, that's the first thing, trauma and vulnerability. Number two, repetition and conditioning. Propaganda creates new cognitive reflexes through repetition. You hear the same thing over and over and over. We are humans. We are like Pavlov's dogs. Germans were conditioned to associate all Jewish people with betrayal, with communism, with chaos, and Hitler was the solution. Number three, authoritarian personality. People like Adorno and others, their research shows that regimes thrive in cultures where rigid hierarchies and obedience are the values of the people. You don't question, you obey. In post-war Germany, with its history of militarism, its deference to authority, they were predisposed to accept that kind of leadership. Here in the United States, we are conditioned. We don't want a Democrat version of Donald Trump taking over. Obama was not bad compared to what a Trump-minded Obama would be. And if you keep pushing, creating an atmosphere of extremism, that's what the Democrats are going to offer up, their own version of Trump. And we see this more on Gavin Newsom pretending to be Trump. Fortunately, he's not. I mean, the guy's an idiot, but we could see the rise of somebody more sinister on the left. You don't want that. Don't give the Democrats a reason to feel like that's what they need to turn to, any more than they should have pushed Republicans during the Obama years into feeling like that the right needed someone like Donald Trump. Okay, we need to return to normalcy. Politics needs to become a boring thing again. Number four, cognitive dissonance. Once individuals that were committed to the Nazi worldview before they became committed to the worldview, in order for them to get on board with this Nazi stuff, they had to, it conflicted with their previous beliefs, with their previous values as a people. Just like today, we see the shift of the same people who used to go around holding up signs about saving the children and would not shut up about it. Everything from Pizzagate, Comet Ping Pong, QAnon, everything. The people who just would not be quiet about child sex trafficking. Nobody in U.S. history has done more to protect a child sex trafficking network than Donald Trump. And Republicans who are loyal to Trump are totally quiet on it. Cognitive dissonance. They cannot resolve these contradictions in their mind. The only way, if they focus on it, if you focus on what Donald Trump has done, and you really think about it, honestly, openly, you cannot but conclude that he's doing some bad stuff, right? To cover this up. And that puts you at odds with your group. Then you got to come out of MAGA. Then you have to criticize Trump. That's one way of resolving what you have gained intellectually from your assessment of the situation. The other thing is to suppress your own concerns. To keep telling yourself over and over, this makes sense in some way. I just need to trust in his 4D chessmanship. And this is the other way of resolving the dissonance in your thinking, the cognitive dissonance. Number 5 on my list is fear conditioning. The SA and the SS instilled fear responses that reshaped people's behavior. They were afraid. Over time, they knew if they resisted, they didn't have to wait for the SA or SS to come around. Just the thought of resisting caused them to have anxiety, which made them self-censor and become compliant. We don't want that in America. So together, all of these mechanisms created what really is just a form of mass brainwashing. The German people experienced mass brainwashing. It wasn't a sudden hypnotic trance. They didn't just, someone didn't come along with the spinning the watch on a string. But it was a slow rewiring of social norms, of values, of individual psychology. So if you out there have a friend or a family member who is under the thrall of MAGA mind programming, the only way you're going to help them is going to be through direct personal contact and conversation. If they were once against war, but they now turn a blind eye to Trump's support of Israel's genocide or his attacks on Iran, or they just don't care that he keeps threatening to send U.S. troops into U.S. cities to straighten us out, they have been brainwashed, and it is not going to be easy to help someone who has fallen under cult mind control to recognize what has happened to them. It is very hard to be introspective when you're when you've been brainwashed. You don't see it. If you're in a religious cult, you don't see it. You can't see it because of the psychological reprocessing, the way that the brain has been rewired to function. So be prepared for your efforts to take time. You can't rush this. You first have to establish that you care about them regardless of their political views. Your love for them has to be truly unconditional. You can't love them or talk to them only if they see things your way, okay? You have to approach them as a friend. You're going to have to listen to some of their diatribes. Find where you have some mutual agreement. Don't make it sound like everything they say is wrong, because probably everything they say is not wrong. There's probably a lot of what they say that is correct. Find that. Talk to them about it. Show agreement. But only after a trusting relationship exists are you going to have any success at helping them to see how far to the fringes they have strayed. Maybe I'll do a show sometime on steps to help extricate people from cult mindset brainwashing. It's not easy. It takes a long time. So the story of Germany's descent into extremism reminds us that radicalization is rarely the product of just inherently evil people. The German people were not evil people. Instead, it's the outcome of psychological vulnerabilities that get exploited by manipulative leaders, that gets reinforced by propaganda and groupthink. And in some cases, it's enforced through intimidation, whether it's violence or just the social intimidation of you better not step out of the group or Laura Loomer's going to be tweeting about you. The German people after World War I were not uniquely predisposed to extremism, but they were a people that was traumatized, that was humiliated. They were desperate for stability, just like, to a much lesser degree, we haven't had those things happen here in the United States, but to a lesser degree, we are experiencing some of that. Things the last decade have been insane politically, back and forth, the pendulum swinging to the extremes. And a lot of us just want to return to stability. But when you're in this state, you become receptive to simple explanations, to stark binaries, to promises of national renewal or the restoration of Christian values or whatever. And you have the rise of Christian nationalism. Or on the other side, you're like, you have the opposite. Propaganda shapes worldview. And over time, citizens in Germany, they just came to accept and even embrace ideologies and actions that they once never would have considered. So for those of us watching similar mass brainwashing taking place today, this story is not only a historical lesson, but it's also a psychological warning. Polarization, propaganda, fear remain potent forces. Watch out for it. Watch out when it's used. And if you will look for it, you'll see it used all the time. Like Trump coming out. He didn't just say, hey, I've got terrible news. Charlie Kirk is dead. You know, let's try and bring things down. It was, he's dead and those damn Democrats did it. Watch out for that. Watch out for efforts by a politician or anyone else. If you're in, if it's religion or whatever, if they're trying to poison you against another group, maybe that's not someone you should be listening to. When societies experience humiliation, economic despair, existential fear, even the perception of it, even if it's not really there, the risk of radicalization is going to skyrocket. So to guard against it, we have to remain vigilant about how these narratives are being framed, how fear is wielded as a tool against us, and most importantly, how groupthink can seduce even the most rational minds. There's no easy answers right now to how to extricate America from the grip of this psychological warfare operation that has entrapped so many of our countrymen, radicalize them into MAGA extremists on the right or the radical social justice warriors on the far left. It's going to take time for us to reestablish a sane majority again, but the lessons of history should be sufficient warning for us to understand that it is suicidal for a nation to remain silent when we see this happening to our population, when we are sliding into extremist thinking, because it leads to not just destruction at a societal level, but this is going to lead to war on a big scale. So we owe it to ourselves, to our children, who are going to be the ones out there getting slaughtered on the front lines of the next world war. We owe it to try and turn the burner down, reduce the national blood supply from this rolling boil that it's at right now, and at least try and get it back to a simmer. Hopefully we can then get it down to just back to room temperature again. But make no mistake, America is in a very dangerous place right now, and we need to help our country calm down and start seeing each other and our fellow Americans again as normal people, good people, rather than as arch enemies. That is the end of my rant for today about this. Thank you for listening. Let's take a look here. Let me catch up on comments, take a look at what's going on out there. Hello, everybody. Once again, I am now out of lecture mode and going back into normal person mode again. Picking up where we left off, Dennis, thank you for that donation, Dennis. Says, good evening, Jake. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Dennis, and thanks for your donation. And also, Droby180 says, if you don't support Israel, you will be a terrorist. That's right. They call you a terrorist if you don't support Israel. Thanks for your donation. So let's see. I think that may be it. The $4 there that we got. Oh, wait, no. There are a couple of donations. I'll just say, David, thank you. I've gotten tons of threads. I make mild comments compared to what you say and can't imagine the stuff you've had to deal with. You're telling me, man. The thank you for the donation, David. It's crazy. Like, people who are normally like supporters of my work and they listen to me talk about stuff all the time. But boy, when I express any nuance on this Charlie Kirk thing, holy moly, the backlash, the anger. I've had people so furious because I will not, because I don't agree that this kid was Mossad. They're like, oh, you're a traitor. You're a traitor, Jake. You're now shilling for Israel. You helped kill Charlie Kirk. Because I won't agree that this kid is Israeli Mossad? I mean, that's crazy. But whatever, whatever. Oliver out there. Hey, Oliver. Let me put on my glasses here. Thanks, Jake. Watching with my 87-year-old German mom. Oh, well, let me just say this. Having talked now for a couple of hours about the German people while not being a German person myself, I'm quite sure I have probably said something to offend your mother, and I'm so sorry for that. I certainly haven't meant to. I hope I haven't. I hope I have stressed that I think that the German people were good, decent people that became radicalized based on a lot of stuff. But anyway. My dad always told us about what you're talking about. Since I was a little kid, he suffered with the poverty after World War I. Thank you for the donation, Oliver. I appreciate you. I know you've been a good supporter for so long now. And thank you for having family watch with you. I appreciate it. Boy. I really, really hope we can stave off another great war. Something I thought about talking about earlier, but I knew I would get off in a rant, and I didn't want to do it, but there was some magnificent economic recovery from the Great Depression. The greatest story never told is a long, kind of a pro-Nazi look at the economic recovery under Hitler before World War II. And it is impressive. And you can't dare have a nuanced look at German society. We are conditioned to see everybody in Germany, they're all Nazi, or back during this time, they're all Nazis, they're all evil. It really upsets me the way that, especially on the left, there is demonization of the German people. Yeah. Red Axis is saying, greatest story never told, and Europa, the last battle, give the other side of the story. And that's what it is. It is the other side. While I do very much enjoy those documentaries, I recognize that they are very biased in the other way. So that's what I'm saying. We've got to take, that's the kind of thing. If I could have somebody who's like, oh yeah, the Germans are all a bunch of Nazis, and I'd have them sit and watch The Greatest Story Never Told. Is it propagandized? Yes, absolutely, in favor of Nazi Germany. But That doesn't mean that it's all incorrect. There was incredible economic recovery, revitalization of industry, whole lot that was done under Hitler. And it's so inconvenient for people uh, to acknowledge or to even listen to the fact that up until around the start of World War II, Hitler was a rock star in the geopolitical world. Western leaders were clamoring for opportunities to get photo ops with him. It's on the cover of Time magazine. So there is a different side to this story that never gets told anymore. Anyway, so I think that there's multiple perspectives to every major historical event, and it does not serve us well to only listen to one side. I think we got to listen to all sides, take all the facts together as an aggregate, or we're going to come out. No matter what, we're probably never going to have a truly unbiased, fair view of things, but it's going to be very, very lopsided if you're only getting your information from one side. And that's why I also, as much as I personally dislike all of this transgender stuff, the fact is a lot of Gen Z and beyond, and even some millennials, but really took off with Gen Z. There's a lot of people impacted by this that either buy into the ideology or support it or tie their personal identities. It becomes a form of religion almost to be a trans advocate. And I've got a lot of friends that are trans advocates, and I don't understand it. I have to always tread very, very carefully because they're so sensitive to any kind of opinion that is different from theirs. But also, and not to such a strong degree, but also when I talk to people on the right, it's the same thing. If I try and say, we could slow down and take a look and see why they feel the way they do, look and see how much of a bad influence really are they? Are they still decent people regardless? And no, Jake, what are you talking about? Shut up, blah, 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 blah. So I get it from both sides. There's no middle ground. And I think that's a shame. I think that we don't have to agree. A lot of times I will listen to both sides and still totally disagree with one of those two sides. It's okay. You don't have to. You don't have to. Thomas Anderson asks, I need an honest answer. Can men change into women? Can women change into men? Absolutely not. It's biology. You can't do it. You can't do it. I disagree with men in women's sports. I disagree with men going into women's bathrooms. I will not call someone by their preferred pronouns if it doesn't match their biology. That's just me, and I won't do it in a rude way, even though they'll take it very offensively. But I understand the English language. I know what words mean. I know what biology is. And if you are a man, I will, if you're a man born with the name John, but you want me to call you Jennifer, I'll call you Jennifer because it's just a name. But if you want me to recognize you as a woman, I won't do it. I'm not going to confuse things by saying she, her, they, them, whatever. And I don't mean to be offensive, but I'm not going to. You are not going to strong arm me or guilt trip me or kick me out of social media, whatever punishments that you want to apply to try and force me to adopt your ideology. I'm not going to do it. You cannot make me. You try all you want to. You will not succeed. And I will take whatever punishments are necessary, social punishments. If I get booted off of something because, I'm not willing to, fine. I'm not going to be mean. I'm not going to make fun of trans people. I'm not going to be insulting. But I am going to stand my ground and say what I what I believe. Just like you have the right to say what you believe. If you want to say that a man can be a woman and all that, and argue the whole thing about gender identity is not the same as biology and blah, 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 go ahead. But I happen to believe that gender identity, while there is some fluctuation there, your favorite colors or whatever, your choice of profession, your degree of femininity or masculinity, all of that, fine, I'm okay with all of that. I know that there's variance. But I'm not going to recognize you as a woman if you are a man. I'm not going to live in that kind of reality where I have to make my mind believe something that I know is not true. But I'm okay with someone else wanting to think differently. Just don't force it on me. Don't force it on my kids. Don't try and use the power of government to compel me to accept your ideology. Xeon's gaming corner. Jake's out here exposing his kinks. I'll take whatever punishment. You have no idea. You have no idea. Anyway, so, I've talked about this for a couple hours now, and I would assume that everyone knows I'm not making fun of trans people or whatever, but there is a high degree of mental illness, of mental disorder associated with the trans community. And I think that there are humane ways of trying to help with this. I think that there's a line that needs to be drawn. I think that we as a society should not be accepting of some things. We can respect another person's right to believe how they want, but we can also take a stand to resist a radical transformation of society into another form of reality that is going to lead to bad consequences for all of us. Anyway. Well, let's go ahead and do this. I'm sorry. Some of you are probably like, when's he going to do the drawing? Let's get to the drawing. If anybody, a lot of Red Axis's messages are being automatically held by the system. No moderators or anyone are sitting here hiding your messages in case you're wondering. It's just probably YouTube system has flagged you as saying things that are too controversial or something. So I'm unhiding a couple of them when I see them, but anyway. All right, I think that let me add this up and do this. I'm going to put a little bit of that goofy music on because it's going to take me a few minutes. Sorry, I was going to read this thing earlier and I didn't. That's on the screen there. This Twitter thing, but I'm going to save that for another time. Just different show. All right, last opportunity to get any donations in. I'm going to start here in a second writing down donations. Second. All right, so here's the jar. So bear with me, guys. It's going to take me a couple minutes to write everything down. All right, I'm going to start out with the YouTube donations. We've got Stephen. All right, Stephen. And as I go along, there may be, if people have made multiple donations throughout the show, then I'll catch up with it. But for right now, Stephen, your $10 donation gets you 2 entries. R Factor. Here we go, R Factor. Into the jar. Mike M. Thank you, Mike M. It's Coleman. It's Coleman. All right. Luvendron. 3. Sorry, I had to convert that. What I'm doing is I'm putting anybody that did the donation of $5 or more in here. All right. Iron Man. And Dennis gave $2. Droby, 180. All right, and then we had here in a second, in just a minute, I'm going to be asking in the chat if anyone made donations that I haven't seen. So I'm just running through these right now. Sorry. I'm trying to find the... Oh, there we go. Nicole. Nicole gave $15. And I'm not saying full names in case they're not tied to identities out there. So Nicole, yeah, because I don't want to out anybody's real name with their username. Oscar, I see you there, bro. I'll add you in a second. So, Nicole, here's our 3 entries into the jar. I'll go back. We've got Oscar the Grouch. What happened to the geopolitical shows that you used to put on? A plethora of info. The Las Vegas event, if people remember. Yeah, Oscar. So in the past, I was getting YouTube strikes and had to delete a lot of my archive because they were going through just hitting a bunch of my videos random, and so I had to take stuff down for legal reasons. I had to take the Vegas stuff down to get the feds off my back, to prevent that from going to a to a federal court. Here we go. But what I could do is start uploading somewhere. I don't know about on this channel, but on either a side channel or Rumble or somewhere, a lot of my archive. It just takes a long time to get that stuff uploaded. Here's your entry. Thank you for your donation. And by the way, for anyone that gave like less than the $2, if you wanted to do a couple more dollars there to bump it up to the 5 to get entered for the stuff, we can do that. All right, so we got that, and then let me check PayPal again. We had Oliver. Here we go, Oliver. Two entries there. And then David. Thank you, David. All right, let me check the chat. What have I missed? Now, even if you have told me in the last minute or so, I wasn't watching the chat. So is there anyone who made a donation to one of these sources that I haven't seen yet? Let me know now so I can make sure and put you in the drawing. This would be a good time to put that phone number back up. I did get a couple calls during the show to the voicemail line. If you want to leave a message. Now, I won't use everything. I won't put everything in a show necessarily if you just wanted to call and say something, but I do want to recognize viewers. All right. Last call here. Anyone out there who has made a donation that I have not recognized, so I can make sure you have a chance at the prize. All right, 10. All right, so we got a total of 56. So this is going to be a tier 1 prize. Let me turn this music back off. Okay. Let's do it. Here we are. We got all the names in here. Also, let me remind you, the tier 1 prizes are a month of free subscription either to Substack, where I do my newsletter and have podcasts there and stuff, free month on Patreon, or a free month on the YouTube channel membership. All of this stuff, you get the same benefits for that. So that's one. Option 2 is going to be a Jeff Epstein air freshener. Option 3 would be an autographed transcript of tonight's Blackstone report. With all of the information that I have shared tonight, I'll put that into a report, okay? Okay. Here we go. Who do you think's going to win? We'll see. All right, lid is off. And I'll also, for today, we'll say for that tier 1, we'll make a free Palestine bracelet by itself an option for tier 1 as well. Okay, not looking. I'm going to stir it up with my hand. Okay. I have in my grubby hand a name. I need to get a drum roll sound effect. Who will it be? R Factor is tonight's winner. R Factor. You are the wiener. So R Factor, I know you're here early on the show. I don't know if you're still out there, but when you see this, what you can do is email me at jake@blackstoneintel.com and let me know which of those tier 1 rewards you want: the Substack, YouTube membership, Patreon, Jeff Epstein air freshener, autographed transcript of tonight's report, or a free Palestine bracelet. Any of those, email me at jake@blackstoneintel.com with your what you want. I don't need your address if it's going to be one of those subscriptions, but anything else, I'll need your address to mail it to. So anyway, oh, there we go. R Factor is in the chat. Great, great, great. Congratulations. Thanks to you, R Factor, and thanks to each one of you who donated tonight. I sure do appreciate it. It is necessary since I don't get any shekels from YouTube for ad revenue or anything like that. This is the only way to make the channel profitable, is through these donations. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, if anyone has seen any items, whether it's like a Palestine flag lapel pin, one of the Epstein air fresheners, bracelet, any of these items that you see me show, if you'd like to buy one just by itself, let me know. The air fresheners are $10, including that includes shipping. And you can check with me on the other stuff, and you just email me at jake@blackstoneintel.com. I do have some merch up at blackstonemerch.com. I've got the autographed pocket constitutions there, and Blackstone caps and stuff like that. I'll put that in the chat there. You'll also find a lot of stuff unrelated to Blackstone Intelligence on my shop that I sell for other stuff. Old monster movie related shirts and junk like that. But anyway, here we are. We have made it to the end. Nothing burned down. I haven't been kicked off YouTube yet. I think it was a successful show. We're all still here. I don't see anyone crying or having seizures of dissatisfaction. So I think we made it. I think we managed to talk about some difficult issues. We managed to talk about Donald Trump, about Charlie Kirk, about Antifa a little bit, about transgender stuff, about Nazi Germany, World War I and II. And we're all still here and hopefully still friends. That's my hope. So, anyway, New Jersey Devil, you like classic horror? Well, me and you can be friends then. I am building on the side a separate business, one that is not likely to get flagged by YouTube or Facebook or anything like that. I've got on Facebook, I've got a page with over 140,000 followers on it. On Instagram, it's like 25,000 followers, although on Instagram, it gets as many views as the YouTube does. It's just more active. Got about 9 million views this last month on Instagram. And it's just little movie reviews and photos of classic horror movies mostly. There's all kinds of different horror subgenres. There's the 1980s slasher films with Freddy Krueger and Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees and all that. But that's what people who are not horror fans, that's probably what they think of is the bloody slasher stuff. But there's so much to the horror genre. There's the old classic monster movies of the 1930s and 40s, like Wolfman and Frankenstein, Dracula, that kind of stuff. Creature from the Black Lagoon in the 50s. There are the 1950s sci-fi horror flicks, everything from Tarantula to The Day the Earth Stood Still, and lots of stuff. There's the hokey, silly stuff with the goofy monster suits. There's stuff that's more psychological horror. There's sci-fi stuff like Forbidden Planet. Move into the 70s with the Hammer horror age with Christopher Lee as Dracula instead of Bela Lugosi from Universal Horror days. Yeah, Andrew Simpson talking about Plan 9 from Ed Wood's Plan 9 from Outer Space. There's that kind of goofy, schlocky stuff, low budget that's hilarious. There's all of the Roger Corman films with Vincent Price and just so much that is good storytelling, good mindless fun where you don't have to think. But horror is, to me, as like someone who loves history, horror captures the sentiments, the fears, the concerns of a particular generation. So when you watch, for example, 1950s movies, and you're looking at like 1958, The Blob, or you're looking earlier than that at like the movie Them, about giant irradiated ants. And there's a lot of stuff where there's fear after World War II. The atomic bomb went off and everything. 1954 is the year that Godzilla came out, and that was the Japanese trying to process this collective trauma of the nuclear attacks on the country by the United States. So you've got that. Move forward into different eras of horror, and you see the evolution of society. I think is really, really interesting. And it's just good, dumb fun. And it's something that I can build that is not going to be attacked by YouTube. Why would anybody want to, attack a movie review site or something? It's just not Not a big deal. So I've been building that on the side. So I've got some income. I earn a little bit from it now, but eventually I'm going to be launching a podcast related to it, and website and YouTube channel doing horror hosting. I've got my Professor Jacob von Blackstone character in his little goofy tweed suit and glasses and everything. And then his twin brother, Dr. Victor von Blackstone, who's kind of the mad scientist guy in makeup and everything. So anyway, just a side venture, something to have fun and also just diversify income in case I get knocked off Blackstone again. Pax Americana says, Rob Zombie made some great scary movies. Oh yeah, Rob Zombie. House of a Thousand Corpses, Devil's Rejects, his Halloween movies. He also did non-scary stuff like the Munsters remake. Zion says, good storytelling, sadly a lost art. Yeah. I really enjoy reading good stories and watching good stories. I'm also an avid comic book collector. I go every single week to my local comic shop. I've been doing it for years. And I don't collect a whole lot of the like superhero stuff because I just don't, it's not my thing. But the comic industry has developed to where there are a lot of independent, adult-themed comics that come out that deal with conspiracies and horror and all kinds of things that I enjoy. I really enjoy storytelling. Yeah, The Devil's Reject was wicked. All right, guys. Well, anyway, thank you so much for hanging out with me. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. It's right at 1 a.m. And I'm going to catch up with you guys next time. So thank you for hanging out with me. Thank you for talking. And we will do it again very, very soon. Take care, guys.